Hobby Quick Hits.
It's time for Hobby Quick Hits.
Hobby Quick Hits.
A sports card podcast where we tackle the hobby's hottest topics in depth to help you navigate the sports card landscape and enjoy the hobby we all love. Here's your host, John Newman.
All right, everybody. Before we get the show officially started, as always, a couple minor housekeeping things that I have to go through. This weekend, calling hours and funeral for my brother took place. I went down to Brooklyn for that, but I've talked about that already. It is what it is, unfortunately. But I want to thank everyone that reached out again. Sent thoughts of condolences, well wishes and encouragement, and whatever form they were in. They came in the form of calls, text, and social media messages, and every single one of those folks that did that, a sincere thanks from me. That stuff does mean a lot, and it does help. That people out there thinking of you or taking enough time out of their day to say, hey, sorry to hear about what happened and that sort of thing. So, hats off to you. Thank you for doing that. We have to keep going. That's how life works. So, that is what that is. And again, I want to say, thank you to everyone that did that. All right, let's hear a word from our sponsor, and then we'll get started with the show. The show today is about being your own hobby CEO. What does that mean? That just means kind of taking charge of your own collection or what direction you want to go with your collection. Maybe not always reading too much into what other people tell you. Advice is great. I give it out on my shows. I get it. Not, besmirching that. But I'm just saying at the end of the day, you're in control. You pull those triggers, those levers on your hobby. And sure, it's great to get opinions. And sometimes those do help. But, be your own CEO. Empower yourself when it comes to the hobby. That's what today's show is going to be about. But before we get to the show, let's hear from one of our great sponsors, Mojo Break. Breakers, their store in Santa Clara, California. Well known. They just won the Topps Golden Cutter Award. I think I'm saying that right. But doing big things across the nation, not just in California. Let's hear from them. Hey folks, wanted to tell you about the best place to get some of your sealed sports card wax products. Great selection and some of the lowest prices on the web. MojoBreakShop.com is that place. Whether it's a box or a whole case, they're your guys, and they ship around the world right to your door. The Mojo Break name is one of the most trusted in the hobby. From sports cards to Pokemon, their selection can't be beat. They offer daily deals and pre-orders. Who won first place at this year's Topps Rip Party? None other than Mojo Break. Their prices are already great, but here's a way to save even more money. Use the code QUICKHITS, that's QUICKHITS, for 10% off anything on MojoBreakShop.com. They also have a full-service card shop in Santa Clara, California. So if you're in the area, stop by. They're open 7 days a week, so check them out at MojoBreakShop.com. Time for another episode of Hobby Quick Hits. And the title of this episode is Be the CEO. And I don't mean be the CEO of Topps or Panini or Upper Deck and that sort of episode where, hey, what would I do different? Be the CEO of your inventory, of your collection, of your hobby, right? So when I came up with the thought process for this episode, I said, man, so many people, I think sometimes don't think for themselves, right? They sort of push and pulled by whatever the wind blows or whatever the hobby wave takes them. And not that there's worse things in the world, but I'm like, even as a 7-year-old, when I first started doing my first show at 15, I sort of had, that inner chutzpah, if you will. A little New Yorker come out right there. A little inner chutzpah. I knew kind of at the time what I wanted to do. I really couldn't be sort of influenced too much, maybe a little bit. And so I think sometimes that happens, even more so in today's hobby game. And the reason why, like back in the day, not a lot of new things happen, right? You could go away for years and you didn't miss a beat. But in today's hobby, you can't go away for hours and something new comes down the turnpike. And it can be daunting for a new collector, a new hobbyist. It can be very scary, those waters. Not to be dramatic, but it can be. And I think a lot of them are sort of latching on to, influencers, content creators. I even know, from the feedback I've gotten on whether it be an Apple podcast review or someone just literally messaging me or emailing me, say, hey, John, I heard what you said about this, and it was great advice, and I did it, love the show, yada, 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 right? That kind of stuff. And so, as content creators, we have a responsibility. We have to watch, what we say. I believe in free speech, say what you feel, but we got to realize those words have an impact on folks that are out there listening to them. And it may make a difference in one person. And, as much as it may make a positive impact, and obviously that's what you hope as a content creator, you can also have the reverse if you're not careful. So I wanted to put in an episode with some tips, not telling you what to do, not specific cards to buy, but some just general rules about being in charge of what you do in the hobby, your collection, your approach. And so I'm going to list some of these I wrote down. I wrote these down literally off the top of my head one night. I just brainstormed. And so I'm going to say what sort of the mantra is and then elaborate even more. And I don't think these are in any particular order per se, so I'll just go in the order I wrote these down. So the first one I wrote down is listen to others' experience and expertise, but pull your own trigger. Okay? It is great. I talk about my 30 plus years of experience in the hobby on this show and on Sports Card Nation, right? I may say, hey, I think this, I think that. And you may listen and say, man, John's right, or John has a point. Or you might listen and say, John don't know what he's talking about. That's the beauty of content creation. But even if you listen, whatever way you fall on, John, I agree with John or I disagree with John or whoever out there, whatever shows, right, or content or YouTube or audio, right? It's great to take that in and listen to others' experiences, but at the end of the day, the trigger you pull needs to be yours. It has to be your decision. You have to own it. When Gary Vee gets a lot of criticism for being, people call him a market manipulator, or he knows what he's doing when he says this. He knows everyone's going to go out and buy it, and then he knows everyone's going to go out and sell it when he says, get rid of these, right? I'm not saying that's not true. I'm sure he knows the wand he wields. I mean, you got to, you have to be naive not to know that. However, I don't blame so much when I hear that and someone like make Gary Vee sort of the poster child for market manipulation. I'll defend them. And here's why. Anyone can say anything, and I know I'm not, Gary Vee to what I say is apples to oranges. That's not where I'm going with this. But even Gary Vee, anyone can say anything, right? He can say anything. If you as a listener to his content go out and do what he says, that's really on you. That is on you. So if he says, hey, go buy, Justin Morneau rookies, who's been retired now and is not a Hall of Famer, hey, they're going to see a jump, and you go out there and don't do the research and just blindly buy Justin Morneau rookies, right? And he didn't do that. I'm just saying hypothetically. I don't blame Gary V. You went out there without doing the research, without doing some fact finding, without doing your own sort of decision making, and just blindly did what he might have said. And I don't actually blame him. This is America, freedom of speech, right? And just like you have the freedom to act. But I blame the person who acts, not the person who says. And so I'm going to give, when I hear those stories, I give those influencers or hobbyists or content creators, I really give them a pass, because they're just saying whatever, and people are taking that and running with it. And that's where, I don't want to say the problem is, but that's where the issue might be. Here's my second one. I went off on a tangent there, and I'll try to keep my ramblings a little bit shorter on the rest of these. Don't get lost in lingo. Don't get lost in lingo. I see some other, people who like to, do these 10 to 15 line sort of marketing haikus, right? And that's great. And some of them ring very true, and some of them I've read, and I'm like, I love that, right? I'm not saying they're bad, but sometimes we get so lost in words, we're not even hobbying anymore. We're almost like reading, a marketing book, or, a how-to, right? It's great, and a lot of it might ring true and hit home. It has for me too, but I really don't get lost in that stuff. Like, that's cool, we came up with a couple lingo. Some would argue that's what this is, and it might be. But, if it takes away from your hobby time, and, a lot of it when you read it, honestly, it's like, it's the same thing. It's just worded differently. It said the same thing last week. You just changed a couple words around. So don't get lost in the lingo, and enjoy the hobby without reading too much into it. Let's put it that way. Next one. This is your company. You are in charge. You have the buying and selling power, right? If you want to sell something, you can list it on a platform. You want to buy something, you have the means to buy it, pull the trigger, and purchase it. You are the CEO. You don't have a board of directors that you have to ask. Maybe your wife is, or your husband, right? Maybe that's your one person board of directors, right? And again, you'll always hear me say, don't buy something if it's going to prevent you from paying your bills. I'm talking about discretionary income here. But this is your company. You don't have to get necessarily permission. I'm not trying to get husbands and wives in trouble here. For me, it's easy, I guess, for me to say is I have my own separate business and hobby account. So no hobby monies come out of mine and my wife's joint checking account. None, not a penny. And so easy for me to say. But even if you don't have that arrangement, and you have discretionary income, whether it's in your PayPal account, whether it's in your pocket in the form of cash or Venmo, whatever, and you want to sell something, you want to buy something, this is your company. Next one, you can rebrand at any time. So we're talking about you as a company, your hobby, right? You can rebrand at any time. Maybe you don't want to collect this particular player anymore, or this sport anymore. Maybe you want to collect this sport or this player. Maybe you want to get into grading where you weren't in the grading. Maybe you want to get out of grading. You can change what you do at any time. It's like a company rebranding. They change their label. They change their logo, right? You can do that as a hobby collector, as a hobbyist, anytime you want to. Whatever floats your boat, all right? Make offers or buy outright, right? Especially when we're talking on auctions, right? More specifically, most likely eBay, right? Auctions have, make offers or buy outright. You have that power, right? If you feel like, man, I don't want to waste no time. This card probably newly listed. It's going to sell rather quick. I think this seller, underestimated this card or is selling too cheap. Don't be afraid to pull that trigger and just buy the card without. I can tell you, most of my listings on eBay have, a buy it now or make an offer, and many times, and I'm glad. Many times I just get a notification, get ready to ship. Card has been sold. No offer. Just someone said, hey, want that card? Price right. I'm not going to dawdle. And don't be afraid to do that. You can get many of a deal that way. And same thing with make offers, right? If you want to haggle, that's the beauty too. You can haggle and try to get a lower price. Take it serious. Here's the next one. Take it serious, comma, but have fun. Take it serious, but have fun. Like, this is serious. We know what some of these cards and packs and wax and stuff is going for price-wise. We know what grading costs. We know what authentication costs to get, an autograph piece that you already have, province, so that you know it's genuine. So when you do want to resell it, that you have some sort of COA from, a reputable group, Beckett Authentication, JSA, what have you. They're not the only two. I just mentioned them because they're probably two of the biggest. BSA, right? Take serious, but have fun. Don't get too serious where there's no fun. If you're having no fun in this hobby, that is a problem. I will be bold enough to say that. If this is all too much serious and you're stressing out and you're grinding and you're not enjoying the grind, then you got to reassess what you're doing. Take serious, but have fun. Share your company's experience. So earlier I said one of the rules, this is your company. Share your experiences. Share what you've noticed. Share what you found out with other hobbyists, right? It's up to them whether they listen or take any advice to heed, but share that knowledge. I can't tell you, how many people, and I've been in this hobby a long time, someone's messaged me, hey, did you hear about this? Or, I did this, or this is happening. And they broke news to me, or I learned something, right? And it don't matter how long you're in the hobby. If you're in the hobby 1 week, share your experiences. I don't care how long you've been in the hobby. Your opinions, your experiences matter. Display your cards, right? Again, that's up to you. I can't tell you what to do. But display your cards, man. You worked hard to build this inventory, to build this collection, to build your hobby company, right? Wherever you display them, whether it be at your office at work or your office at home or your wall at home, be proud of what you amassed, your collection, whether it's a grail card you recently acquired or, a $20, $30 card that just means the world to you, that has a story behind it. These are all little pieces of artwork. And I'm not talking just Project 70 or Project 2020 cards. I'm talking about cards in general. These are all pieces of artwork with stories behind them. Maybe the story is how you acquired it. Maybe it's a great story. It took you a long time, or you had to haggle for years. Those are some of my favorite stories where hobbyists said they've been trying to track that down for years. They find the card with whoever owns it. And, maybe it's a card to complete a rainbow, and they're pleading with the person, hey, I'm doing this, I really need it, what's your price? And it becomes a year or more process, and then they finally work a deal, and you have those crazy stories behind it, right? Every card is a piece of art. Every card tells some sort of story. Some are bigger stories than others. Some are bigger price tags than others, and that's okay. And it doesn't matter if that card's $1 or $100,000. They each have some sort of history, some sort of story behind them. And funny thing is, the dollar card might have a more interesting story than the $100,000 card potentially, and that's one of the beauties of the hobby. So there's about 10 little anecdotes, nuggets, if you will, about controlling sort of your hobby. I got to say, this was a real, all my episodes that I do, I enjoy and I find them fun. But this one, a little bit more, just writing these down and thinking of how I apply them and how maybe it can help you on your hobby journey. Thanks for spending a little time with us today. We'll give out our social media credentials and we'll call it a show. And we'll see you next time on Hobby Quick Hits. Hey folks, thanks for listening to the show. Wanted to give out our social media links where you can follow the show even when you're not listening to it. On Twitter, we are at Hits Hobby, HITSHOBBY. On Instagram, we are at Hobby Quick Hits Podcast, at Hobby Quick Hits Podcast, all one word. Our website is www.sportscardnation.net. Look for the link to Hobby Quick Hits. You'll find us there. And you can always text us on our text line, area code 315-491-0239.